All right, guys, today's video is buck recovery. I will do a series of videos to show you different tactics that I employ. Today we're going to focus on the understanding what buck recovery is and a couple of steps to help get deer accelerated and get out of that rut. Literally, that's a pun, rut. So what happens is for all you beginners that are just getting involved in deer hunting, and I'm glad that you are. By the way, for those of you watching, welcome to the channel. The group is not quite a year old yet, and it's growing at a pretty good clip. So I do enjoy the fact that people are at least watching the videos and hopefully gaining some knowledge. Now, let's get back on track here. Over here we have a situation to where I've got really nice green material here. All right, so we need to dive deeper and just beyond what's in front of you here. We got to understand where these deer are coming from and how we can fix these problems, or at least the vast majority of the problems that we see. So I'm going to use my place to do all examples by, because my soil is just so bad. I think it will really help people that don't have great soil, like people that live in the Midwest. They have fantastic soil compared to me. So we're going to try to raise the bar here and grow bigger deer through soil improvement program. All right, so let's start at the beginning. Deer during the spring and summer are in tank up mode, which means they are devouring as much food as they can find. Bucks are really trying to eat as much as they can. Does are having to eat as much as they can because now they're fixing to take care of babies, or babies are growing inside of them. Deer have to ramp up their food supply. So whatever the deer manages to eat during the spring and summer and fall, early part of fall, that is what we considered the peak body of a buck. So I'm going to use a 200-pound buck as an example. So up here at the beginning of the season, you got a nice heavy deer. He looks great. You've estimated him to weigh, really high. You get all excited. And then we have the rut. The rut kicks in. He begins to chase and fight. The body begins to decline. And somewhere, depending on how bad your soil is, it may take a nosedive and land somewhere here out of my screen, and then tries to recover and come back and get to where he was before the rut ever took place. We have to find ways of getting rid of that dip, or at least smoothing the curve out to where it's not so bad. Your deer should be, as far as your average herd, should be coming up. They'll probably level off during the rut. That's a really, really good goal to have, and then move up again. That's what you want. You want deer trying to constantly move up in size. If you need population, you want them to keep moving up in population. This is what we're after. So how do we affect that downward spiral of a buck? Well, the first way to do it is what you see right here in front of you. Lots and lots of food. A quarter-acre food plot is not going to cut it, guys. These are what I consider attraction plots. There's not enough size here to really help a deer that much. Now granted, I have a main food plot which is designed to pack on a lot of weight. That's out there. But when these two are working in tandem, because they're so close together, this one is kind of like an extension of my main food plot. So now I'm trying to increase the grocery load in here. I'm also trying to increase the soil quality in here to not only make these plants even more attractive to deer, but produce even higher tonnage than anywhere else around here. And if I can get this soil the way I want it, this quarter-acre plot, when it's all said and done, at least my goal, will have so much food packed in it here that it will have more food than that area there, as far as you can see. Because now the nut crop is gone. There is just basically nothing here. That's what people have to understand, is food, food, food. So if a buck is coming to your food plot and he's chasing does, and let's say he comes up over here. He comes up, he looks around, looking for does, doesn't necessarily see them. So what is he going to do? He's going to do what I see this all the time. They will come in here, drop their head, get a quick bite, and keep going. They don't stop. They just grab a bite, and exit the plot. They're looking for does. Their main objective is not food. But at least when he is doing that, from there to over here, he is getting a very high dose of nutrition, even though it is a small amount. That will help sustain that buck a little bit better than not doing anything at all. So if your goal is to increase your deer, and let's say you own 30 acres of land and you're planting 3 to 5 to 10 acres of food, depending on what your surrounding indicate to plant, that bell curve where it's coming down, suddenly it's not so steep anymore. When he's up this way on peak, it might take a hair longer for that drop off to happen. And the better you get at this, the better that line will flatten out. So instead of dropping off the screen of my phone, it might come down, swoop this way, and you've cut the recovery time in half. So the other thing would be soil improvements. This is what you want to do. The better this soil gets, the better these plants taste, and the more nutrition you throw back at deer. This is how you go from seeing a deer that's a 3 or 4 year old that might score 120 inches or maybe up to 130 inches, that suddenly jumps up to them 180 mark or 200 inch range. There's a huge gap between that type of deer and a deer in a non-controlled environment. So if he's just relying on what's ever around, the size of your bucks will vary. Mostly from what I've seen in my area, I've seen deer here that will score 100 inches up to 175 inches. And I grew that one, and I grew another buck that scored 168 and some change. But once they got outside of the territory, there wasn't any other deer bigger than that. So I only affected a couple of bucks in here, and their outcomes was way better than any of the other deer. So I'm going to get into an even deeper dive on the babies that will be born in your herd. This is part of the stages of recovery. So let's look at how I'm trying to get poor ground to help assist in my recovery. So over here is where I did the straw display for you. So I re-sowed the whole back half, threw the straw in there, tilled it all in. I came back a little bit later and finished off a bale and just lightly scattered it across the top. So whatever you see sticking out in patches here is leftover straw from where I did a double round of that. And obviously this looks a whole lot better versus over here. Now on this end, this is the nasty soil that I'm dealt with, which makes it harder to grow deer because these plants are very limited in space and nutrition. So I came in and I've added straw to help increase organic matter in here. And granted, I didn't sow this near as thick because I've got greenery already up and I don't want to smother it out. But I've lightly came in and added additional organic matter to the soil. That will boost these plants and feed them anytime there is warm days during the month. Once it drops below freezing, the bacteria won't function. So it's going to have to rely on whatever it can get out of the soil. So up here, you can see even more straw is laying out on this half of the island, all intended to increase the nutrition output of my food plot. Now let's talk about the recovery part of a buck. So if a buck is down here at the bottom and you have just started your management program, instead of this and a slow recovery, you might see this and a steeper recovery up, which means you have reduced the time that it takes for a buck to regain his weight before the antler growing season happens. Because once the antlers get going, the goal of that deer is to get above his weight range of the previous year until his body is beyond peak, and then that will decline on its own naturally. But during the youth of a deer, you want to keep adding more and more weight. So for beginners, if you go ahead and follow whatever the professionals tell you to do, you're going to start seeing deer jump from, now I'm going to use my area again as an example. A good buck back in the day would have weighed 100 or maybe 110 pounds dressed. And we're talking deer that were 3 or 4 years old. That's rough. Guys, that is really rough. And now I've got bucks that are 2 years old that are dressing well into the 130s. I've even had deer in here that have weighed 230 pounds. And we used to call that deer Tank. He was our special buck, and EHD got him, unfortunately. But that deer bulked up on food. He got really fat. These are things that will take time to happen, guys. So you can still see a change in your deer year one, but it's going to take many generations, 2 or 3 generations, to really start seeing the fruits of your labor. So a buck that you've been watching, let's say you think on the hoof it weighs 120 pounds, you start your management program. Well, if you harvest that deer the next year and he dressed 150, job well done. You have increased the weight of that deer greatly to make him fat and happy. And that means he's got way more muscle mass, not just fat, more muscle mass, which means you have more meat for yourself. So this is why we do buck recovery. I am just getting tapped into this category, but the first 2 things you want is a lot of food and good soil. If you don't have good soil, give it time. Plant a constant rotation of species, as many as you can afford to purchase, not just one species, as many as you can. Build this soil up with organic matter, and you will change your deer and hopefully have the best hunt of your life. So I hope you find this video informative. There's a long way to go here with this project because it is in year 1, and hopefully in the next 2 years you're going to see a vast difference in what I'm doing to get this ground going, because I should have to do less work than I did the year before. That's the goal. As this ground gets better, I'm going to do less work. And then if I want to expand to another project, that will allow me the time to do it, instead of staying up here working and getting tired and going back to the main food plot and working there. Because the ground is getting better, I don't have to spend near as much time in my main plot. Up here, I'm focusing probably 80% of my time now up here trying to get this going. And then my great effect on the deer is a faster recovery. It's going to be awesome, guys. The more I keep improving this small tract of land, the better the outcome will be for any deer that stays here and becomes one of my regular deer. All right, guys, I hope you find this informative. If you do, hit that like and subscribe button, and don't forget to hit that notification bell. I'm ramping up on this recovery phase. There are many different strategies you can employ to increase your deer faster than by not doing nothing at all. Have a good one.